you're a third year medical student at King's, this video is for you. You guys would have just received your ballot numbers 2 days back, and I just want to give you guys some of my top tips in terms of picking placement lines based on my experience as a fourth year medical student. So let's get going. This is particularly relevant to those who had a middle to lowish ballot number. So the first tip would be to prioritize what matters to you. Think about what matters in particular. So for different people, it's different things, but I would say think about when you have exams. You're going to have exams after block 4. That will be your fourth year finals. And then after block 7, you'll have your fifth year end of year exams. So you obviously want to take that into consideration and think about where you want to be before those exams. Another thing that people think about often is electives. So you can think about whether you want it first or second. Personally, this wasn't a huge priority for me, so I didn't really filter by electives, but I know that for some people they want to have their elective in the summer, so they'll pick transition to F1 first, and then they'll pick elective second. So I would say definitely take that into consideration if that matters to you. Another thing would be think about whether you generally want to be central or peripheral for fourth or fifth year. That is also, it differs per person. There is no right answer, right or wrong answer. Personally, I wanted to be more peripheral for most of fourth year and then a bit more central for fifth year, but I know that for some people it's completely opposite and you have to take QIP into consideration. So I will come to QIP in a second, but those are some things you can consider. Another thing would be look at the order of the blocks that you want for fifth year in terms of blocks 5, 6 and 7. I've heard that it's good to do your GP block in block 7 because that means you get to do OSCE style practice in terms of loads of clinical examinations before your fifth year finals. So do consider that. My second tip would be to look at feedback that people from the year above have given, and ask people in the year above about different hospitals and different blocks at different hospitals, and their experience of that and whether they'd recommend it when you're deciding what line to pick, because otherwise it can be quite overwhelming to decide what speciality do you want to do in which hospital. So yeah, some of the places where you can find good resources include the GKT MSA website. Often they have talks where they'll include some people from different hospitals and they'll give their feedback of what they thought of the hospital. And I think that's really interesting, actually. Like, ask people what they think pros and cons of different placements are, and definitely take that into consideration. My third tip would be to take into account when you will have your QIP. For us, QIP was based on block 2. When I say that, I mean our block 2 site was where our QIP was based, but your QIP might not just be limited to block 2. You might still have to you might be meeting your supervisor in block 1 to just kind of get some work done in the beginning, or you might go back to the site. You most likely will, in most cases, go back to that site in block 3. For most QIPs I've heard about, not all of them, but that's just a heads up for you. So take that into consideration to avoid having to commute excessively in block 3. I'm really grateful that my block 2 and 3 were roughly in the same place, or I was kind of living in the same place for blocks 2 and 3. So that's made it that's kind of facilitated doing some data collection, but I would definitely say take that into consideration. And, I think for years above, Quip was actually block 1. So I think they've actually changed it recently for Kings because, yeah, like I mentioned, it's based on block 2 now. The fourth tip I would say would be to find a preferencing strategy that works for you. So obviously I'm giving you the tips based on my experience and things that mattered to me when I was picking my placement lines, but I would say definitely see what works for you. Some people might say pick your favorite lines regardless of what ballot number you got. And I think that's fair enough. I think for me, I kind of went by process of exclusion because there were so many lines which I thought I could go with. So I would, if you're interested in my preferencing strategy, I excluded, I would say, 1 or 2 hospitals that I looked into, I read about on the Keats website, and I looked at the commute, and I wasn't too interested in those hospitals. And once I took those, I wouldn't say it's because those hospitals were bad. I think I just, like I mentioned, it was just the commute, and I just wasn't really interested in the area, so I just kind of removed those. But once I did that, I kind of color coded the rest of the placement lines red, amber, green in terms of how much I liked those placement lines. And I also removed a couple of placement lines that I thought realistically, based on my ballot number, it might be a bit tricky to get. You don't have to do this. I just thought that it might maximize my 20 placement line options and make it more likely that I would get something that I did pick. But as I mentioned, there is no right or wrong way to pick your lines. Some people would still say just pick your favorite lines, regardless of what ballot number you got. But I would say that going by process of elimination really worked for me. And just because you've removed certain lines doesn't mean you can't add them back after you've looked at other placement lines. And I would say also see kind of what blocks you're happy to be flexible about, and you don't mind, necessarily, you don't mind traveling a bit more, or you don't mind where you're going to be for those blocks. Okay, really nice. Now that we've gone through some key tips, I want to talk to you, this is my point 5, I want to tell you about my experience of the blocks that I've been placed at so far, and some pros and cons of choosing those allocations. So my first block was Margate, and that's where I had women's health. And I would say I really loved that block. It was really fantastic. I loved starting at Margate because it was very social. I think everyone had either returned from intercalation, like in my case, or they were coming straight from third year, but it just seemed like while we were all easing into stage 3 together, it seems like people were more eager to socialize. So I think the peripheral was really good for that. Something to take into consideration. I think the teaching was fantastic. The hospital itself was really good. There were loads of opportunities to see C-sections. I really liked it. I think for women's health, I really enjoyed Margate for block 1. And yeah, I would say the only cons of going to a peripheral is if you don't have a car, then you kind of have to rely on public transport or just walking everywhere. I think the nearest supermarket to the hospital accommodation, which is where you'll be staying. Oh, I should have mentioned that actually. If you're in peripherals further than the M25, I think most of the peripherals will offer free hospital accommodation, so that's definitely something to look into. I know some hospitals like Darrant Valley don't necessarily offer 4th years free accom, but I think it should say on the spreadsheet of the placement lines whether that placement is offering you accommodation or not. But yeah, that's definitely a plus side of, I'd say, of any peripheral accommodation. I think that's why people tend to rank continuity lines so highly, because once you settle in somewhere, if you're happy to be in peripheral accommodation, a peripheral placement and peripheral com, then I'd say that it's a good option. They're all good options. So yeah, as I was saying, if I would say that personally, if I was going to be in Margate for more than one block, I would definitely bring a car. And yeah, but otherwise I would say there's plenty of stuff. There's like a running club, there are things you can get involved in. It's very social, it's a really good location. For block 2 I had KCH for child health, and I thought this was really great. The teaching was top notch in KCH. I have to say, I feel like it was all extremely useful, and our block lead was really good. She was very proactive about all of the teaching, and she would respond really fast if we emailed her about anything. I thought it was really quite a good block. And were there any downsides of KCH Child Health? I mean, obviously it's not a peripheral, so you're not living on site, so obviously there's like a small commute, but that's the case for most hospitals. So I would say there weren't any huge downsides to KCH for child health. For block 3 I had SLAM. So now this is the one that I kind of I wasn't sure which trust I was going to get for mental health. It could have been either SLAM, Oxleas or Canterbury. And I think on the placement line it said mental health TBC, meaning to be confirmed. And I went in thinking I didn't really mind where it was going to be, so I was kind of more flexible with that. But this did give me a bit of stress around block 2, when I still didn't receive my specific placement location. I think I only received that a few weeks before block 3. So if the location of your mental health placement matters to you, definitely pick something which already specifies where you're going to be for mental health. In terms of the actual placements, I've spent the first half of this block at Bethlehem, and it's been really good actually. I think the team has been really nice. There have been opportunities to do different things. And then for the second half, I'm currently at Lewisham, so that is older adults, so it's like different, because the first half of this mental health placement was more like adolescent psychiatry. So I'm getting a different experience of psychiatry now, and I would say that it's quite nice how you get different experiences. And yeah, I'd say that overall, like I'd say it's quite a good block. The commute was quite long to get to Bethlehem for me, because I was traveling to like near. I mean, it is quite south. It's near Croydon, but that's okay. I mean, I think it was only for 4 weeks, and I think you kind of do get used to the commute, and most of the placements you're going to have commutes anyway. But overall, I would say I'm pretty happy that I got SLAM, because I'm close to my QUIP site. So all of these different things are things to factor in when you're picking your placement line. For my last point, I just want to emphasize that all of these lines have their pros and cons. They're all good and bad in their own way, and there are no bad lines. So if you're feeling like you didn't necessarily get a great ballot number, it's not the end of the world. You can still think about what order you want to do certain placement blocks, and you can still pick what you want. Like, just prioritize what matters the most to you. And I think it's more about thinking about the pros and cons of doing different blocks in different hospitals, and using that, like taking that into consideration when you're ranking your hospital blocks. But best of luck with picking your placement lines and your top 20 choices. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them below. Or ask any medical students. Like, I would say definitely speak to as many 4th or 5th year medical students as possible who've been to different placement locations for different blocks, and try and like get an understanding of pros and cons of different of placements at different areas. And yeah, you've got this.